know that there are next steps because I've seen how many next steps there have been along the way. God's never done with us, He keeps moving us on. And maybe calling, maybe we need to reflect on whether that word is the best word.
Like millions of people around the world, we need to work. Some do it for the money, others do it for the recognition. And if you're lucky, you do it because you love it. But finding purpose and passion in your work can be easier said than done, and the path to success can be unpredictable at best. Maybe you love your job, and maybe you hate it, or maybe you're just going through the motions. But if you're looking for some inspiration, then I've got one question for you. Are you consuming your career, or is it consuming you? Welcome to Consuming Careers. The idea of having a calling can really be confusing and elusive. Should I expect to be called into a career before jumping in? Do I only have one calling on my life? And can my calling change? Hi, I'm Bruce Smith, and in this episode of Consuming Careers, we'll explore the career of David Slagle as he navigated first into the healthcare industry, then into pastoral ministry, then right back into healthcare, and how his definition of calling evolved throughout his life. So let's jump into my interview with David. Well, welcome back to Consuming Careers, and it's a great night here in downtown Decatur. And I've got David Slagle joining me this evening. David, welcome to Consuming Careers.
Thanks, Bruce. Good to be here.
Oh, and so David and I, little secret, are longtime friends, probably got to know each other for, maybe 8 years ago?
Yeah.
Yep, where our kids went to school together at Providence Christian Academy in Lilburn. And I asked David to join me on this because David's story, and we'll get into that in a little while, how he's moved between ministry and healthcare, and how he got there is, to me, I think is just fascinating and can be applied in so many ways. So David, where are we tonight?
We're on the square in Decatur. Right next to the old courthouse in the square, where Veritas Church, the church that I planted along with Debbie, sits just outside this window, just to our right. Lots of great pubs and restaurants, lots of life. It's the center of Decatur life here. Yeah.
So you started your church at the courthouse. So there wasn't a sign about separation between church and state anywhere to be found, or did you just hide that every Sunday?
Well, to be fair, it's the old courthouse on the square. It's not the current courthouse, and so it's used for functions, weddings and banquets and things like that. And they invited us to use it, so we did. It's the old Superior Courtroom is upstairs. It's a beautiful space. And great acoustics. So we were able to get started there right in the middle of Decatur life.
Wow, that's fantastic. Well, just outside this window, we see a lot of different restaurants, and it's, the sun's going down. It's a beautiful night here in the fall, and we're in O'Sullivan's. We tried to go to the Brick Store, which is a little pub down here where we actually had our first, when we got together, our wives, we had our first meal together and became fast friends. But O'Sullivan's is it's an old building, brick walls, just a classic Irish pub, and we've got some Irish food coming. We both got some freshly poured Guinness.
Nice.
Nothing better than a good Guinness. And shepherd's pie and what'd you get? Fish and chips on the way. Chips. So excited about that. So when those come, we'll talk about those too. Well, why don't we get into your background, David? Would you mind, a little bit where you grew up, how you kind of your first work, what was your calling, kind of what was your passion, kind of where did you land? I'll let you riff on that for a few minutes.
Okay. So born and raised in Atlanta. In fact, my claim to fame is I was the first baby born at South Fulton Hospital in East Point.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. How did that work? Well, let's try this one.
I went down there recently to visit my niece after she had just had one of her children, and they didn't have any pictures on the wall of me.
Nothing.
No parades to greet me. Do you know who I am? But yeah, I was born and raised here in the Atlanta area, and had a really nice suburban area kind of a childhood. It was a sweet time growing up in the Atlanta area. But I was in high school. The last day of high school, I had no idea what I was going to do. We didn't have any money to go to college, junior college maybe.
Yeah.
You know, just work, go to school, work, go to school. But all of my friends were going off to Georgia, to Auburn, Alabama, various schools, and I couldn't imagine what I was going to do. So on the last day of high school, I'm walking out the door, happily walking out the door, wanting to leave quickly, so badly. And I heard a voice behind me say, "David."
Uh-oh.
And so I stopped and turned around, and it was actually one of my favorite teachers. And I turned around, and I came back, and I spoke with him. He said, "David, what's your plan? What are you going to be doing?" And I said, I really don't know. You know,
Yeah.
I don't have the resources to go to college. I just don't know. And he said, "Well, here's something you might want to think about. Clayton General Hospital, which is Southern Regional now, it's the local hospital in our area. They are offering this deal where if you will come and work for them for 2 years, they'll pay your way through nursing school."
Okay.
And I decided right then, I'm going to be a nurse.
Wow. Okay.
It had never entered my mind to be a nurse. That was the furthest thing from my mind. But, you know, a free ride through college, just promising to come back and work there. And
so no personality test, no skills assessment.
No.
No Myers-Briggs.
It was money. It came down
Okay.
to, they're paying for my college. I am in.
Yes.
And my older sister is a nurse.
Okay.
And so I thought I probably knew something about nursing. I didn't. And what I came to find out very quickly was that I faint very easily. I fainted more than anybody in my nursing class.
Oh, my gosh.
Every single trip to the hospital, you know, all of our clinicals, I was fainting almost weekly.
Like, what was it? Was it the blood? Was it the injuries? Was it just
pure, unadulterated fear? All the smells, all the sights, things that I had never really seen before. I didn't see people bleeding. I didn't see people getting dressing changes and all those kind of things. And the fear that was on people's faces when you came into their room, just because they're about to have surgery or they're about to have a dressing change. I really took that. I soaked it up into myself, and I think I was just so empathetic sometimes.
Yeah.
But I came to find out what caused me to faint more than just about anything was knowing someone was in pain.
Yeah.
It wasn't necessarily a sight or a smell or something really bloody. If I knew somebody was hurting, I was hitting the floor.
Yeah.
And to the point that the dean of the program came to me and said, "David, I think you need to consider that maybe nursing isn't for you and looking for something else." And
so you're still in school at this time?
Yes.
And you're kind of doing it. Is that a residency that you're going through or something?
Yeah, kind of. A clinical. It's the equivalent. It's where as a nurse you're actually you're doing schoolwork, but you're at the hospital too, and you're actually hands-on and learning. And so I'm a year in at this point, and she's saying, "David, I don't think this is for you." And I was having those thoughts myself, of course.
Yeah.
Nursing programs are famously difficult.
Okay.
Our class started with 150 people, ended with 50.
Wow. All right.
And it was academically very challenging, and on top of that, here we are working at the hospital. I'm fainting. I can't handle what I'm doing.
Sure.
And so when she says to me, you might want to think about getting out, I'm thinking, well, I've already had those thoughts. But the bigger thought to me was, I don't have a choice. That was my feeling at the time. I have to stay in this. I have no other plan to pay for college.
Yeah.
And so I just put my head down and gutted it out. Sometimes literally. There was gutting out going on, and I'm watching it. But I got to a place where I understood here are the things that caused me to faint, and I became more acquainted with. Every time I fainted, I got better at not fainting.
Okay. I thought you were getting better at fainting. You know, like you brought a pillow with you.
Yes.
Or some sort of soft landing.
Yes. I actually went into, right out of nursing school, I went into mental health nursing because I thought to myself, there's not going to be any blood and guts and goo, in mental health nursing. That's just something that happens in, surgery and on medical surgical floors and that kind of thing. But I was wrong, and I won't go into the gory details of that. But it really was a good place for me to get started. I think I took advantage of some of the natural gifts, which I think I had, which was empathy. Being able to just talk to people comfortably who are hurting. And so it was a good place to begin.
Well, I would think that empathy is kind of a double-edged sword, isn't it? In that profession.
Yeah, you can be too merciful, and I know that would strike the ears of some people as, that doesn't sound Christian. That doesn't sound compassionate. You could never be too merciful. Well, you can be. There has to be some way in which you're able to help people, and you've got boundaries too.
Yeah.
You're not allowing yourself to get swept up so much into whatever they're going through, whether it's physical pain or mental pain, that you can't help them. And so I began to navigate that and learn that and how to deal with it. So.
Okay. All right. So you graduated.
Yeah.
You graduated, and then you started working where?
I worked on the mental health unit at Clayton General Hospital.
Okay.
I had to fulfill, my obligation, but I loved it. I was having a great time. I did that. And I stayed in mental health nursing at various facilities for about 7 years.
Okay. All around the Southeast or Georgia?
Yeah.
Primarily Georgia?
All around the Atlanta area, Charter Peachford Hospital, one Christian psychiatric facility called Rafa. And then, of course, Clayton General Hospital. And so I did all of that for about 7 years. And then I began to see something that was happening in the mental health industry where reimbursement was shrinking. And people just were not getting inpatient care.
Sure.
And I could see where that was going, and I was ready to try something else anyways. And so I jumped right into the fire. I decided I'm going to go apply for a job in surgery at Piedmont Hospital.
Wow. Okay. All right. So when you say you jumped right in, did you view that as something just more of a commitment, or that's really going to get into serious, hands-on operating room nursing, critical care,
it was
trauma?
Another very pragmatic decision. Just like I'm going to nursing school because somebody's going to pay the tab.
Yeah.
I didn't dream of being a nurse. It's just here was an opportunity, and so I began to think to myself, all right, this inpatient mental health scene, it seems to be slipping away. I want to do something that has a long shelf life for the foreseeable future.
Yeah.
Surgery's not going anywhere. People
good.
are going to have surgery for as far as we know, forever.
Yeah.
And so I decided, I think that is the safest place to be.
Got it. So in that, 7 years in mental health nursing, did you feel like you were
you were getting better at it, and then maybe you were able to move from just doing the work to, hey, maybe this is something that, I've been called to do, or I can really find some purpose in, or I can see myself retiring from this industry, this occupation. What were you thinking about that at the time?
I don't think I ever really saw myself doing anything but nursing at that time.
And were you excited about that? Was that like, hey, I can do this?
Yeah.
Okay.
I liked nursing. I always did. Now, to back way up, I felt like that I was called into ministry when I was 13 years old.
Okay.
And after the initial excitement of everybody patting you on the back at church and saying, that's great, David's got a call on his life and everything, I began to think that through about what would that look like. And I didn't know anything about ministry. All ministry meant to me at the time was a pastor of a church.
Right.
So I'm going to put on a brown suit. I'm going to preach on Sundays. I don't know what I do during the week. What do pastors do during the week? He was in his office a lot when I was growing up, and he'd come out and pat me on the back and smile at me. And
hey, I can do that.
Yeah, that didn't look all that hard. And so I thought about this calling, and I began to really become disenchanted with the whole idea of being called into ministry. I didn't want to be a pastor.
Okay.
I still kind of believed that I had a calling, but I didn't understand anything about calling. All it meant to me was probably going to be a pastor someday. So I ran from that, and I think the Lord allowed me to do that, all right, get out there, look around, see what's going on, learn who you are, what your gifts are, what your gifts are not. And so I was able to go, get into nursing. Whatever my misinformed or pragmatic reasons might have been, I do believe that God was steering the ship still.
Yeah, okay.
He was allowing me to find out my strengths, my gifts, my abilities, what I love, what I don't love. So spent 7 years in mental health nursing, learned a lot about myself doing that, and learned a lot about people doing that. And once again, I make this pragmatic choice. I'm going into surgery because it felt like never going to lose your job doing this.
Right.
You're always going to have a job.
All right, so you land in surgery at Piedmont Hospital.
Yes, and I didn't love it. I was in it for a few months.
Yeah.
And I had a preceptor that I didn't love.
What is that? What is a preceptor?
A preceptor is like a mentor.
Okay.
So
all right.
The person who's teaching me the ropes in surgery.
Yeah.
And so just began to dread going in every day. I like surgery just fine. Surgery is really actually boring. You want it to be.
Yeah.
You don't want exciting things to be happening.
Predictable,
Yes.
on schedule.
Yes. Yeah. You want people to come in, they are on the table, they're draped. You can hardly even see them. You're looking at a 1 foot by 1 foot square that you're working on for that person to try and make them well. And surgeries last, from anywhere from 30 minutes to 5 hours, depending on what the surgery is.
Yep.
Frequently, 2.5 hours, where I'm either a circulating nurse, which is a nurse that sits and takes notes in the room.
Okay.
Or a scrub nurse, which is handing instruments to the surgeon and assisting the surgeon. And it's a long time on your feet, doing not very much. And so having a preceptor that was a very challenging personality and just not finding this to be all that fulfilling for me.
Got it.
And I love surgical nurses. They're great at what they do. They're very gifted. They're very smart. I just knew, boy, this isn't for me. And I was really just about at my wit's end. And once again, it was almost like that scene in high school where somebody calls out to me, David, how are things going?
Yeah.
This guy named Michael Queen, and he was over pre-op and recovery. And I was almost on the verge of tears. I just was so miserable.
How long were you in at Piedmont?
I was probably coming up on 6 months in surgery, and they've invested a lot in me at that point. And so the last thing I wanted to do was say, I'm just out. I didn't know what I would do next anyways if I left there. But he asked me, how are things going? I'm crying. And I'm just like, not good. And so he sat down and we talked together, and he said, what would you think about pre-op? I think I'm going to love it. I don't know what you do, but it's not this.
It's not this, yeah. Anything but this.
Yeah.
Sounds great.
I was fainting a lot in surgery, too.
That's awkward. Yeah?
Yeah. I specifically remember one time, you know what? Orthopedic surgery looks like wood shop.
Now, look, I took wood shop in high school, or actually middle school. That's right. So walk me through, how is orthopedics like wood shop?
So the tools that are on the table, you're looking at hammers. You're looking at saws. You just look at the table there, and you're seeing a lot of the same kind of instruments, except not for cutting wood, man. And so I remember distinctly, I was in a surgery where it was a hip replacement.
Yeah.
And you think of a hip replacement. So a hip, a prosthetic hip, it looks like kind of like a small tennis ball with a spike attached to it. And that spike goes down into the femur, and that ball goes into the hip. And you're all better. That broken hip has been replaced by this.
Sounds easy enough.
Yeah.
Done.
And so
next.
So that spike, it has to go down into the marrow, right down into the femur, and I sort of imagine that the surgeon would just push it down in there. Or at best, he would take that little hammer and tap it in.
But it would be a nice, cute little hammer that just tap it in. Just tap it in.
It looked like a railroad man driving a spike. He is coming back with a lot of force and kapow, kapow. And I just remember that, and then everything going dark. So this is not working. Ooh. So another opportunity where God is like a shepherd who is, okay, go ahead, and then intervening providentially on my behalf and sort of saying, all right, I'm going to nudge you a little bit this way and into pre-op. And it was perfect. I'm getting people ready to go to surgery who are scared. It was a lot like my mental health experience. I loved talking to people who are struggling.
Well, nobody's talking in surgery.
Nobody's talking in
surgery. Nobody's talking in surgery. That's a great point.
Yeah, I really loved having patient after patient after patient that I could talk with, calm down, pray with, prepare them, not doing anything gooey, bloody, scary, no fainting involved. It was perfect.
That's great.
I loved it. It the most satisfying nursing job I ever had, pre-op.
That's great.
I did it from 1992 to 1999.
Well, I bet there's a lot of people listening that have been in that bed or in the wheelchair heading into pre-op, and maybe nobody talking to them, right? And maybe nobody encouraging, and they're just talking about the facts of what's about to happen.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
For sure. Not at Piedmont Hospital.
Of course not.
Mind you. But I do.
And we'll get to that.
I say to myself every day, you do this every day. But the people you're going to see, they don't.
They are not professional patients.
And no.
Wow.
So.
Okay. So 99. We're enough time in pre-op.
Yeah, and that calling into ministry was reawakened in me because I married a Christian woman who took her faith seriously, and I began to feel it reawakening and thinking about what that might look like, what ministry might look like.
Yeah.
And some unexpected things happened. I kind of decided, all right, I don't want to be the guy in the brown suit showing up on Sunday to preach and then doing whatever pastors do. I want something more prestigious. I'm going to teach in a college setting, seminary setting, Bible college setting, you know.
Wow. Okay.
And
look, by the way,
Yeah.
prestige isn't normally in the job description of anything in the ministry.
yeah, I didn't say it was. I'm saying that's what I
What you
wanted.
wanted.
Give me can I have a dose of prestige, Lord? You know, if I'm going to do this boring brown suit job, just give me just a spoonful of prestige.
Every now and then.
Oh, I teach at a college. I'm a professor.
That's right.
Something. But, you know, when people ask you, what do you do? And you say, I'm a pastor. That didn't have that ring of prestige to me. So, yeah, there was a lot of sin involved in the way that I was going about thinking through what ministry looked like and what I would be doing. Actually, I had just decided, well, for now, I'm going to go to seminary. I'm going to take care of that because that's what you do.
It's required.
Yeah,
Gotta do it.
that's the next
Most of the time,
step. Yep. So I was wrapping up my seminary education.
Hold that thought.
Yep. Oh, look at that.
Oh, we got some food showing up.
I'm not going to give you any of my food after all. This looks fantastic.
Isa, thank you so very much.
Can I help you with anything else?
I think we're good. All right, so you've got some good-looking fish and chips there, dude. Now, that looks way more than you can eat. I'll tell you that right now. I'm not a professional, but that looks way more than you can finish. And
Yes.
my shepherd's pie looks fantastic. Golden brown. Oh my gosh, this is going to be tasty. So I'm really disappointed we couldn't have about all the listeners show up to O'Sullivan's for this dinner.
It does. You know, almost everything in front of us is a crispy golden brown.
It's fantastic.
Really, the only thing green is, what do you call that? Those leaves on top of your shepherd pie.
Alfalfa sprouts or
Yeah.
something.
Yeah.
You know, I was thinking about this the other day, that one of the reasons that I wanted to do this podcast with food and a place associated with it is so many things in life happen over food, right? So
Yeah.
decisions, relationship,
The Last Supper.
Last Supper, you know, just life experiences are celebrated with food and drink.
Oh, yeah.
And so I just thought kind of wrapping that in even with work and the whole idea of work, that we all need to work, we all need to eat. You know, it's all part of the same kind of experience at the table.
Yeah.
So, and I think we, by and large, take it for granted, right? We blow through our whatever, Big Mac, and we just use it to get it out of the way
Yeah.
while we're driving.
Yep.
And it takes a discipline to kind of slow down and say, we're going to enjoy this food,
Yeah.
and we're going to take time together to kind of just experience this time. So
Savor.
to savor the experience, the food, all of it that was really created to bless us, right?
Yeah.
So we're going to take turns eating while we talk.
Okay.
And I'm going to turn it back to you as fast as I can. So I want to get to kind of the calling, kind of what sealed the deal for you on that. And were there any other outside influences? Because this wasn't a matter of expedience, right? There wasn't somebody just saying, hey, here's a great opportunity. We're going to pay your way through seminary, and you can land at a church that we've already identified for you, and it's in Oklahoma, and you can start as soon as you graduate. So this is a little bit softer. This is a little bit less black and white. And, you know, I've been asking the question about calling in my life, like, is what I'm doing, have I been called to it? Was I ever called to anything? I have those doubts often, especially when things aren't exactly going like I think they're supposed to be going.
Right.
And so, and I think we all have those doubts, but, you know, that whole idea of calling, like, how do you know it's a darn calling in the first place? So I'll turn that back to you. So talk to us about that move. You're changing gears now from healthcare. Yeah. Listen, by the way, it's just a different type of healthcare, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, so
yeah,
riff on that for a minute.
Sure. So outside influences, the outside influence that comes to mind immediately was my wife.
Wow. And how long have you been married at this time? About 1999?
So
2000.
5 years.
5 years, okay.
Yeah. And I had been in seminary now from, almost from the time we got married. I was finishing my bachelor's so I could go to seminary, then going through seminary. And
now, have you left healthcare at this time? Or
no,
are you doing seminary on the side?
No, I was doing it on the side. So
wow.
I was going to seminary. I was working full-time in pre-op at Piedmont Hospital, and I was working part-time as a youth director in Canton, Georgia.
Okay.
A friend of mine was in seminary, and he was overseas, and he needed someone to spell him for several months.
Okay.
And so it was a very tiring time driving to Canton after going to work. And
it wasn't the booming metropolis it is now.
No, not at all. But so she knew before we got married, you know, we had talked a lot about my calling into ministry.
Yeah.
And my idea of calling has really expanded a lot since, just over time. Initially, it's a guy in a brown suit preaching on Sunday.
Yeah.
That really was all it could be. And so it began to develop into, it could be teaching in a seminary or a Bible college. It could be any number of pastoral opportunities, but still it was fairly narrow. And so the one thing I knew I did not want to do was be a pastor. And I told my wife that. I said,
you know, that's
yes.
usually pretty dangerous.
Oh, man. I said, I will never be a pastor. And Debbie said, I think you will. And I can't tell you how many times that has played itself out. We had just started visiting a church. And, we had been there for a little while. And I said, we're not going to tell anybody that I'm in seminary, because they're going to want to put me to work doing a Sunday school or something. So we're going to keep quiet about that. But it got out. And before long, the pastor came to me, and we began meeting and talking about it. And then he offered me a job. And we were at a Waffle House, and he said, I'd like you to think about starting a contemporary worship gathering at our really very traditional church. It'll be one of the options in service. And
now, remind me, where are we now? Are we in
Snellville?
This is in Snellville.
Snellville, Georgia. Annistown Road Baptist Church. JoJo Thomas was the pastor. Godliest, most Christ-like, person, more like Jesus than just about anybody I've ever known. But he said, I'd like to offer you this opportunity to do this. And I said, yeah, I appreciate that, but I don't think I'm called to be a pastor. Mm-hmm. And so he said, well, think about it. And so kind of just to get him off my back, I said, okay, I'll think about it. And so I came home to Debbie and I said, you are not going to believe what JoJo asked me today. She said, he invites you to come on staff as a pastor. I said, did he talk to you? No. David, you're going to be a pastor. Well, to skip to the chase, I became a pastor. And it was a lot of fun. Started that service. It exploded. It was a lot of fun. A lot of people coming to know Jesus. Just a really, really sweet time.
That's great.
Yeah,
that's great.
Under a good preceptor, a good mentor.
Yeah. Okay. So you were at Snellville.
Yep.
How long were you there? And then you left. Obviously. Let's talk about that.
In one capacity or another, really from about 97 to 2003. And I began to feel like God was calling us to plant a church.
Okay. That's a big step.
Yep. We talked about it a lot. Ended up deciding to become a part of what really was a preparation to plant churches. It was a seminary program at Asbury Seminary. Mm-hmm. And we got accepted into the program, and it was funny. It was a big deal. They only accepted 12 students a year, and they paid for your life for a year. You got some of the best training in the world. And but we were there for the interview with the dean of the program. His name was Dale Galloway. He met us at the airport at Delta. We were in the Crown Room, and he's talking to us. And after it was all over, he said, well, do you have any questions for me? And I thought, man, I need to go big or go home right now. And I said, yes. Am I accepted into this program? He said, yes, you are. But I'm going to tell you something. It's not because of you. It's because of your wife. She is amazing.
That's great.
Went through the program, got some great training. We're still undecided about where we want to plant, praying about it a lot. And one day, I came home from class. I said, Debbie, I think I know where the Lord wants us to plant a church. And she said, Decatur, Georgia. I said, oh, man. She was always ahead of me.
All right, what's up with that?
She's a better Christian, a better person. She's amazing.
It's like, Lord, can I just have my own revelation every now and then?
Yeah.
So I'll tell that same story with Carol, with my wife, Carol Lee. She will finish my sentence, and I'm like, Carol Lee, can I please just have a few moments alone in my own mind? Just a little bit of privacy.
Come on. Why do y'all have to know everything?
Just give me that, just a few minutes. You can't put on one of those foil hats,
No.
They can think right through that stuff. So,
Yep.
All right, Decatur, Georgia,
Ma'am.
planting a church. That's not for the meek.
No, it's not. It's the hardest thing I've ever done in my life, and lots of joy, lots of tears. And we chose to plant in Decatur, Georgia, which is not the Bible Belt.
Yeah.
The Bible Belt comes in and loops around Decatur, goes out to Snellville, and then keeps going. But it really was like being on the mission field.
Yeah.
It was like, somebody might disagree with me who's there, but being in a country where Christianity is just not common. And so it was tough, really tough sledding. But we started right out there, the old courthouse on the square. Had a great time. We got going, and we built up momentum. And we eventually ended up in a building that we purchased over near, kind of in the North Decatur area. And again, there was never a time where it just felt like we've arrived. It was always tough sledding, but we were seeing great things happen.
Yeah.
And so we did that. We planted in 2004, and I was...
and that was Veritas, right?
Veritas Church.
Yep.
And I was there until, let's see, is it 2022? 2022.
Yeah, that's just a year ago.
Yeah, 18 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yep.
So I'm sure we could do a whole series of podcasts on that experience.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And you and I have talked extensively about the challenges you've had, the successes you've had, and your experience there as the pastor at Veritas. And look, our careers, whether they're in ministry, whether they're in accounting, whether they're wherever they are, as much as you architect a safe, safe travel. Yeah, I mean, it always comes up where you're going to have challenges. Of course,
God is not safe.
That's right. That's right. And I think especially true in the ministry, where the challenges just seem to be even bigger.
Right.
And they're so multi-dimensional, right? It's not just you did a bad job, so you get fired, or you did a good job, so we get a pay raise. It's humans interacting with humans with personalities and independent thinking and
brokenness.
passions and brokenness and sin and just everything wrapped up, right?
Yeah.
So, okay, so you were there for 18 years, yeah, 18 years. All right, so somewhere, I know in those last 2 years, we started talking about, is there, is God calling you to leave? Do you want to leave? Are you thinking there's a next chapter that you're excited about? So, when we think about changing jobs, sometimes it's, I see a better opportunity, so I chase the bigger opportunity, or I see something where I am dying and I need to get out before it sinks. Yeah. And there's a lot of things in between those. You're either pushed or you're pulled. Yeah. And so where were you on that continuum?
God has been so faithful to use circumstances in my life. And I think that's how he operates in a lot of people's lives. We want to hear a voice. We want someone to say something that's like a billboard that just is a clear message from God, and that's never happened to me. So I had circumstances, and God spoke through those circumstances. A teacher as I'm leaving high school. A manager at Piedmont Hospital pulling me aside and asking, how are things going? Me just breaking down and saying, well, not so great, And so all really not circumstances that anybody would look at and say, that was such a spiritual moment. It was just a happening.
Yeah.
God working through people. And it began to happen again. And there were so many circumstances this time. COVID.
Yeah.
And a very active and sometimes difficult climate in terms of cultural, political environment. And it became much harder than ever, but not so hard that I was thinking, well, I've got to quit because it's hard.
Right.
But all of those things were happening. But the biggest thing that was happening in my life was that my parents were getting old.
Really?
Yeah.
I mean, that was, you characterize that as the biggest thing. And so it wasn't any kind of turmoil that you might describe?
No, there was turmoil.
Yeah.
All of that was sort of the setting.
Okay.
Turmoil was the setting. But what became the overarching circumstance in the middle of just the turmoil of church planting and leading a church, it was my parents aging. They were in their 90s. My parents were born 12 days apart, 2 miles apart. As newborns, they played in the same crib as infants. They've known each other their entire life.
That is remarkable.
Yeah, married 73 years.
Wow. Wow.
And very healthy. But they're in their 90s, and they had reached a point where they were really slowing down. And I have 4 siblings, one who's in Texas, but there were 2 brothers and a sister here in the Atlanta area. And the 4 of us in the Atlanta area had agreed to take a week at a time. We would go up and stay with my parents. And Veritas Church was gracious to allow me to be able to do that. But all along, my parents are becoming slower, more weak.
Yeah.
In 2020, almost, 3 years ago this week, my sister had left her house in the Athens area to drive to take care of my parents early in the morning, and she pulled out onto a highway, and there was a car that was coming. The lights did not have the lights on. Was traveling 80 plus miles an hour, and she was killed.
Oh my gosh.
And it is the first time I had ever really experienced tragedy in my life. I reflected, and I thought, I've never had a tragedy in my life. Everything's been softer.
Yeah.
And so it was big. She was just such a force in our family, a sweet person. She was a nurse, a much better nurse than me. She understood the medical field, and she always knew the right thing to do for our mom and dad, medically and otherwise. So we really leaned into her, and she was gone. And on top of all that, now we were down to 3 of us who were traveling up to North Carolina, and I'm trying to pastor a church, and I'm going up every 2 weeks. I'm going up for a week to stay with my mom and dad, and the church was being gracious about allowing me to do that. But I knew this was not something that would continue to be sustainable.
Yeah. Was there anybody in your life pastoring you? I mean, because, you've got the challenges at the church, but then you've got your sister, your mom and dad.
I don't think I was good about doing that. I think I really did allow things to kind of cave in on me. The pressure of the church COVID was still big.
Yeah, sure.
No one knew what to do. There were some people staying home because of COVID, some people not, some people masking, some people not. And even my elder board was split right down the middle on what we should be doing, whether we should be meeting. And so it was all just such a time of crisis that it really was becoming overwhelming, all of it. But I knew I was at a place where I could not be the person to keep leading the church forward.
Got it. Yeah.
I didn't have the emotional or physical or mental energy to do it. And furthermore, I knew that the word calling really began to expand for me.
Yeah.
I had a calling to honor my mother and father that preceded any calling to ministry. And I wanted to honor that. And so it just seemed like, because of circumstances And, of course, engaging my wife, who is a prayer warrior, we finally came to the conclusion that I needed to go ahead and step away from pastoring the church. And it was a crazy thing. Finding another pastor, a new pastor, in the best of circumstances, it can take 2+ years.
Oh, yeah.
More. And we're talking about months, and I told my elders, and they said, well, let's see if we can find somebody. We couldn't find anybody, and we agreed, well, the only option really is to shut down, because we couldn't find anybody who could lead the church.
So nobody inside willing to step up.
Yeah, we're a small church. We had a small staff. I'm the only really full-time person. And so we were about a week from closing down, and a friend of mine, he was actually the cross-country coach for our boys.
That's right, he
at
was.
Providence.
We know him well.
Scott Williams. He called me just to say, hey, I'm thinking about you, praying for you. And Scott he had left teaching at that point. He had been pastoring at a big church as an associate, and he was in a specific program training on how to revive churches that are, beginning to decline or in decline for one reason or another. And we were just about to hang up. I was thanking him for calling, encouraging me. And I just blurted out, what would you think about pastoring Veritas?
You're a high school track coach.
Yeah, you could do it.
How hard can it be?
Right. You need marathoners, that's for sure. And so, David, I wasn't calling you trying to get a job. I know. But, Scott, it's either the church closes down or somebody who wants to do this as a pastor steps in. And so, without going into the whole story, he stepped in.
Which is an amazing story.
It is amazing. And how God's fingerprints were all over this. He understands the area. We knew him. He was a known quantity. Yeah, it wasn't somebody that, we've just met and we're trying to do a whole bunch of interviews to figure out what's this person like.
So David, you were the voice down the hall that called Scotty to say, hey, you want to be a pastor?
Well, actually, he called me. Oh, I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
Yes, I am the one, saying, have you thought about doing this?
Because it wasn't a 2-year interview process.
No, it wasn't. It was 1 week.
Yeah. And maybe it was on, I don't know if it was on Scott's mind, but you asked the question, right? And so, and he engaged. That's
circumstances.
Yeah.
Just circumstances that only God could have orchestrated, just bringing about circumstances. And my sister's death, my parents aging, and just needing to honor what God had called me to do all my life.
Yeah.
And so, of course, I began to think about, well, what are we going to do?
That's right.
We got to replace. We got to have an income, and
we've had these conversations quite a bit. Like, what's next?
Yeah. Oh, it was scary.
Yeah,
it was scary.
And there's a list of the options that we've talked about.
Oh yeah.
Starting a company, consulting. I think you were thinking about doing some remodeling. There was, building furniture, selling porch swings. Which you built for me, by the way, which is still swinging.
Awesome.
So no liability there yet, but we're enjoying that on our front porch.
Yeah. I was looking at everything. I was looking at all the things that I was able to do and trying to just, in a panicked almost kind of a way, figure out what next. And my wife said, I want you to stop. I want you to stop and just take as much time as you want, but at least just take 3 months and rest. And what a gift. I was so tired.
Yeah.
traveling back and forth to North Carolina, coming back home, needing to be ready to jump back in to leading the church, and trying to lead it from a distance at the same time. All of that was just, I was worn out.
Sure.
And so that time of resting, it allowed me time to think, to rest in God. And nursing had always been a possibility. I had my license, and I liked nursing. And so by the end of that 3 months, we came to an agreement. You've got a license. Go. You like doing it.
Yeah.
You like nursing. Let's begin to look into it.
At least the way you remember it
Yes,
20 years ago.
right. It had been 24 years, and so how do you jump back in? Can you jump back in after 24 years?
Yeah,
Even
sure.
if you've kept up your license, suspect some people are going to say that's too long. Things have changed so much.
Yeah.
There's just no way. But again, the whole idea of calling expanded again. And ultimately what I realized was that my reason for going from ministry to nursing was as much a calling as many years earlier leaving nursing to go to ministry.
Wow.
Both
Wow.
were a calling. We want to define calling down to pastoring, being a missionary, kind of the classic ideas of what church work looks like, or what evangelism or the gospel looks like. But calling, Chuck Swindoll, he was another influence in my life. And he talked about calling at a time when I was trying to figure out, am I really called to be a pastor? And he said, this is what calling is. You can't do anything else. You feel that God's pull on your life to move in a particular direction is so strong that you can't do anything else. You can try, but you find yourself just not at ease at all, and wanting to be pulled back into God's rhythm. And so I was called back into nursing. And then I started looking for a job, and I couldn't find one. Anywhere.
Well, wait, this wasn't part of the calling.
Yeah. God, how are you going to work? I thought you called me back to nursing,
Yep.
and now I can't buy a job. And I was on the phone. Actually, it was just through like Facebook. I was messaging with a nurse that I used to work with who was still on the pre-op unit at Piedmont.
Okay.
Her name was Carol. And I had helped to train Carol 26 years earlier. And she said, David, I think there's a job here for you if you want it. Well, I applied. I wasn't hearing anything. A doctor that I used to work with named Jeff Shapiro said, let me look into that. And then I heard something. And so came back to pre-op at Piedmont. The girl that I had trained 25 years earlier is now training me. And it was such a beautiful kind of a circle that had happened. And once again, I'm watching how God is using circumstances, and how calling is so much bigger than a brown suit on Sunday. I am now working on the same pre-op unit that I was on 25 years earlier.
Wow.
Things have changed. Methods have changed. The principles of patient care haven't changed at all. You show compassion and kindness. You love on people. You help people. Yes, there are things that I had to learn how to do. We chart with computers now, not pencil and paper or pen and paper. So a lot had changed, but I felt like I was back home again.
That's great.
Yeah,
That's great.
It was, and is. I'm having a fantastic time
That's great. Yeah.
Being back.
So that whole idea of calling, and I think you've laid it out well, so it's not a single, I don't want to put the words in your mouth, but it's not a single calling like whatever the occupation is. It's not a single calling and you're going to be this nurse all your life, because that is the ordained calling, or whatever that is, right? So it's okay that calling can change over time. And I think there's some permission there that people need to hear is, the calling you had when you were 20 might be different when you're 30, which might be different when you're 40.
Right.
So that opens up, is there a next chapter for David? Do you see that? Do you expect that? Do you doubt that? Kind of another chapter?
Oh, I absolutely believe that there is. My dad, he was classic blue collar. He was a production foreman. Worked hard, demanding physical labor. At some point, we all, ideally, we get older, and there's less that we can do. We slow down. Our joints begin to ache. There are things we can't do. So does that mean that God doesn't have a calling on those people anymore?
Yeah.
He's done with them. They age out. Of course not.
Right.
So I know that there are next steps because I've seen how many next steps there have been along the way. God's never done with us. He keeps moving us on. And maybe calling, maybe we need to reflect on whether that word is the best word.
Because it does sound singular.
It does.
Doesn't it?
It does.
Sure.
It sounds almost mysterious. I felt, and I may come up with a better word, but prompted and guided. Just prompted and guided, moved, and gently. Like a shepherd who's not whacking a sheep, with the shepherd's staff. He's nudging.
Yeah.
God has been nudging me throughout my life, and sometimes I ignore the nudging, right?
So would you say, I'll ask you, does calling precede kind of a sense of purpose and passion, or do you find a purpose maybe in healthcare? I'm being helpful, and then you realize this is what I've been called to, and my passion grows? Or do you have this ethereal passion outside of the career, and then you step into the career because you have this passion for it, which might be interpreted as a calling?
I think there are things that we do. Get out there and do something, move. That old saying about, you can't steer a parked car. The car needs to be moving. And so start moving. Start finding out what you love, what you're good at, what gifts and abilities God has given you, how He has formed you, and let God nudge as you begin to enjoy doing those things. I think there were probably times when I avoided pursuing certain things that I really enjoyed because I just didn't feel like, that didn't feel like a godly calling, a godly passion. There was nothing inherently sinful about it, but I limited myself when I think it would have been better to just say, move, do things, learn how to work with wood, learn how to draw, learn how to work for people, how to engage with people, and be willing to be bossed and taught and all of those kind of things, and let God nudge you and steer you in that process. So, I would say discovering by doing precedes what we might think of as a call. We begin to narrow and understand who we are and what we could be doing as we explore lots of things.
So when I find myself, and I look over my career, and there are things I've done that I'm like, man, I'm hitting on all cylinders. And there's other situations where I'm like, man, there's no cylinders in this car. So, but when I look back and I try to find, if I'm hitting on all cylinders, was there a calling that got me there? Or was there something that a chance I took, or a nudge, just to try to understand what that sounds like in my life, what that calling may or may not be.
Yeah.
So I want to get a little practical, because we're gonna wrap this up. So get a little practical. So you're talking to. We both have kids in college.
Yeah.
And with my daughters in college and Georgia College, GCSU. They've got a lot of friends in the nursing program. And what advice would you give to someone, coming through college in the nursing program, maybe early in their career in nursing, anything that would kind of inspire them or encourage them, or maybe get them on a path of, hey, maybe this isn't for you? Like, what are those personality traits, or anything? What have you got on that?
So, what I said a second ago, go ahead and do something. I think God nudges us and steers us, or we're aware of his nudging and steering when we're active. So don't go back to your apartment and sit down and wait for a revelation.
Right.
Begin to enjoy just doing things. And once you've landed on something, let's say that you graduated from nursing school, you've decided you're going to give nursing a try. I think you need to stick with it. Whatever area you choose, you need to stick with it for a year.
Okay.
If you jump ship, even if you're absolutely miserable, then I think you're missing the nudgings, the learning, what you hate, what you love, how to deal with people that are very difficult. Those are things you're going to have to know how to do throughout your career. And I think we're tempted to jump ship too early.
Soon. Yeah.
Stick in there. It's going to be tough, and there are going to be tears, but even set a date. That's helpful sometimes too.
Okay.
To say, I'm gonna finish 1 year, and then I'll see how I feel at the end of 1 year.
That's good. Yeah.
But I think that's an important thing to do.
Okay. All right. And what are you reading now, David?
Just got through reading a book called The Wager. The Wager.
Okay. Tell me about that.
It's based on a true story. It's not fiction. It's a historical account of this British naval ship that was going to attempt to overtake a Spanish ship full of gold.
Wow. Okay.
And they were going to have to navigate going around the Horn below South America. It's the most dangerous place in the world in terms of ocean waters, attempting to sail a ship. There's no place more dangerous, even to this day.
Yeah.
It's constantly in hurricane force winds because you've got South America up here, you've got the Pacific meeting the Atlantic, you've got warm climate, cold climate down below,
right.
Antarctica, and so it's a very terrifying place to be. And these people still don't have a handle on, you got to eat oranges, man. And so people are dying and suffering. It is a very, very difficult life. And they end up in a shipwreck on a deserted island, and the challenges that they go through. And eventually... I won't give away the story.
Please don't. Yeah.
It's fascinating what people are willing to do to just endure.
Yeah.
It
Wow.
really, and the name of the book is based on the name of the ship. The ship was called The Wager, but
The Wager.
Yeah,
Got it.
really,
All right.
really is fascinating.
So, if you haven't learned anything, you've learned to eat your oranges. Scurvy, isn't that the scurvy? Yeah,
Scurvy, man. I had such a moderate idea of what scurvy was. Yeah.
It just sounds bad.
Yeah, but I'm thinking, your muscles ache. Maybe your eyesight is a little bad. No, your body melts. That's what happens. It's terrible. And all they had to do was eat an orange. Yeah.
Oh, that's great. That's great. All right. About one more last question.
Yeah.
So, if you had to say, this is the Consuming Careers podcast. So, would you say that you've consumed your career, or your career has consumed you? Where would you, looking over the last 40 years, how would you characterize that?
Both. I think when your career is consuming you, and I'm just thinking out loud about your question right now. I may rethink this later, but I think when your career is consuming you, that's not a good place to be.
Yeah.
God should be consuming you. God is an all-consuming fire. Our pastor last Sunday at Christ Covenant, his name is Thomas Nelson, he was preaching on all of the things that we focus on. We want the Bible to speak to us about this specific thing that's going on in my life. When I open up my Bible, tell me what to do about this, and about this, and about this, and about this. Instead of going into it saying, tell me about you, Jesus. And that when you get consumed with the gospel, when you get consumed with Jesus, He is going to take care of the other things. Seek ye first the kingdom of God, and all these things will be added unto you, right?
Yes.
And so when I was in that place, I didn't feel like my career was consuming me. And I didn't feel just the opposite, like I'm consuming, like I'm the one in charge. I felt healthy. I felt like God is doing the nudging and the steering. And yes, sometimes it's painful, but I would rather be in pain with God steering the ship, right? Nudging me one way or the other, than to enjoy some kind of a pseudo success or happiness that I'm pulling together, because it's going to come apart. It's eventually going to come apart. So
you're not foreshadowing the wager, are you?
I hope not. I have shipwrecked my life many, many times.
That's great.
Yeah.
All right. So lastly, what is there any way that if somebody wanted to reach out to you, ask you a question, say thank you, is there any way that anybody can connect with you? Facebook, LinkedIn, I guess you could find you there, or...
Yeah, I'm on Instagram under Yes Literally, and I'm on Facebook, just David Slagle, Slagle, or clydeslagle@gmail.com.
Wow, all right.
clydeslagle @gmail.com. That's probably the easiest way.
That's great.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for doing that, David. And I want to thank you for taking the time to jump out here to have dinner with me at O'Sullivan's here in Decatur. This has been a fantastic experience. As you can tell, it's gotten a little louder in here, so things are brewing. So
hey,
again,
if you're going to buy Guinness and fish and chips, we'll do this again anytime.
We'll pick it up here next week.
Sounds good.
So thank you again, David. This has been fantastic.
Thanks, Bruce.
Thank you for joining us on Consuming Careers. If you've enjoyed the show, please click the follow button in your podcast app so you won't miss any of our future episodes. And if you have a minute, write us a review. We truly appreciate hearing from our listeners. And as always, I'm Bruce Smith, and you've been listening to Consuming Careers.